Good morning. Thank you so much for coming in today. We are looking for a seasoned administrative professional to take over our front desk operations. We need someone who isn't just managing the flow of people, but someone who can actually optimize how we do things. I see you have about 4 years of experience in this field. To get us started, why don't you tell me a bit about your approach to the front desk role and how you've evolved over those 4 years?
Good morning and thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Over the last 4 years, my perspective on the front desk role has shifted from seeing it as a purely reactive position to seeing it as a strategic hub for the entire office. Early in my career, I focused on the basics, like answering phones and greeting guests. But as I grew, I realized that the front desk is actually the primary point of data collection and the first line of defense for company culture and security. In my most recent roles, I've moved beyond just executing tasks to designing the systems that make those tasks easier for everyone. I've spent a lot of time mentoring junior staff, helping them understand not just what to do, but why we do it that way. I've focused heavily on process improvement, looking at where bottlenecks happen, and using a bit of technical savvy to automate repetitive parts of the job. My goal is always to create a seamless experience for the visitor while reducing the administrative friction for the internal team.
That's a great way to frame it. Since you mentioned the visitor experience, let's dive into some real-world scenarios. Front desk work can be a bit of a minefield when it comes to privacy. Let's say a visitor comes in and asks for personal details about a colleague who is currently on leave. They might be acting friendly or even urgent. How do you handle that without breaking protocol?
That is a classic challenge. The priority here is maintaining absolute confidentiality and following company protocol, regardless of how friendly or insistent the visitor is. My approach is to remain polite but firm. I would inform the visitor that I am not authorized to share personal information about our employees. I find that if you frame it as a company-wide policy rather than a personal refusal, people tend to be much more understanding. To keep the interaction positive, I wouldn't just stop at the refusal. I'd immediately offer an alternative. I'd say something like, I cannot share those details, but I would be more than happy to take a message for you, or I can direct you to a general department email where you can leave a request. This ensures the employee's privacy is respected and the protocol is upheld, but the visitor still feels that I'm trying to be helpful and that their needs are being acknowledged.
I like that you pivot to a solution immediately. Now let's pivot to the internal side of things. With 4 years of experience, you're likely in a position where you see the mistakes others are making. If you notice repeated administrative errors from a coworker, how do you address that tactfully? You don't want to sound like you're policing them, but the errors need to stop.
I believe the key to addressing repeated mistakes is to approach the situation with patience and a focus on solutions rather than blame. If I jump straight to correction, people get defensive and shut down. Instead, I prefer to have a private, calm conversation with the person. I make it a point to explain the impact of the mistakes clearly. For example, instead of saying you're doing this wrong, I might say, when this form is filled out this way, it creates a delay in the billing department that affects our turnaround time. Once the impact is clear, I use open-ended questions to find the root cause. I'll ask if the instructions were unclear, if they feel they lack specific training, or if they are simply overwhelmed by their current workload. Often, a mistake is just a symptom of a broken process. If it's a training issue, I'll offer a one-on-one session or create a quick reference cheat sheet for them. If it's a process issue, I'll look into adjusting the workflow. Finally, I set clear expectations for the future and document the discussion briefly so we can follow up and ensure the improvement is sticking.
That sounds very professional. It shows a level of leadership and mentorship. Let's talk about a different kind of pressure. Imagine a visitor is very insistent. They want to speak to someone who is absolutely unavailable. They aren't being aggressive, but they are refusing to leave or hang up. How do you manage their expectations without sounding dismissive?
In those situations, the goal is to make the visitor feel heard and valued, while still guiding them toward a realistic resolution. I start by acknowledging their request and expressing genuine empathy. I might say, I completely understand why this is urgent for you, and I want to make sure we get this resolved. Then I provide a clear reason for the unavailability without oversharing. I won't say the manager is at a doctor's appointment, but I will say they are currently in an unavoidable meeting or away from their desk. After that, I move quickly to alternative solutions. I'll ask while they are unavailable, is there something I can assist you with personally? Or perhaps there is another team member who can help you with this specific issue right now. If neither of those work, I'll offer to arrange a specific callback time. By giving them options, I'm shifting the conversation from a dead end to a pathway. It moves the focus from the person who isn't there to the actions we can take right now.
Dealing with a variety of people is a huge part of this. You'll be dealing with high-level executives, outside vendors, and perhaps people who have no idea how our industry works. How do you adapt your communication style when speaking to, say, a highly technical expert versus a non-technical visitor?
I view communication as a translation exercise. When I'm speaking with a highly technical expert, I use precise terminology and assume a baseline level of familiarity with the concepts. Keep the conversation concise and data-driven. If I'm discussing a system issue, I'll dive into the specifics of the process or the technical challenges involved because that's what they value. They want the facts quickly so they can act on them. However, when I'm speaking with a non-technical visitor, I strip away the jargon. I simplify complex ideas and focus on the practical impact or the immediate benefit. I find that using analogies or real-world examples helps bridge the gap and ensures they don't feel alienated or confused. The goal is to make the information accessible and relevant to their specific perspective. I always keep a pulse on their reactions to see if I need to simplify further or if I can provide more detail.
Let's talk about time management and prioritization. You're at the desk, you're critically busy with a high-priority project, maybe a board meeting preparation, and you notice a coworker is clearly struggling with an assignment. They are looking to you for help. What do you do?
This is a balancing act between being a team player and maintaining my own professional commitments. My first step is to quickly assess the urgency and complexity of their task. I can't just drop everything, but I can't ignore a teammate in distress either. If I determine that their task is something that can wait an hour or two, I'll be honest with them. I'll say, I can see you're working through a tough spot, and I definitely want to help you get it right, but I'm on a critical deadline for the next 90 minutes. I'll come find you the second I'm clear. But if the task is urgent and needs an immediate fix, I'll try to provide a bridge solution. I might point them toward a template, a previous example of a completed project, or a specific SOP document that has the answer. If I'm truly underwater, I'll suggest another team member who has more bandwidth at that moment. The key is to acknowledge their need immediately so they don't feel ignored, provide a clear timeline for my assistance, and ensure they have a temporary workaround to keep them moving.
That's a very mature way to handle it. Now, on a more day-to-day level, how do you handle it when you're hit with a wave of multiple, simple tasks all at once? You know the phone is ringing, someone needs a badge, a delivery has arrived, and an executive is asking for a printout.
When those waves hit, the first thing I do is stay calm. If the person at the front desk looks panicked, the energy of the whole office shifts. I prioritize based on urgency and importance. For example, the person standing in front of me usually gets a quick acknowledgement first, then I handle the immediate physical needs like the delivery. Also try to group similar tasks together to increase efficiency. If I have 3 things that require the printer, I'll queue them all at once rather than walking back and forth. If the volume is truly overwhelming, I don't hesitate to delegate. I might ask a colleague, could you please hold this delivery for a moment while I finish this printout? Staying organized and maintaining a steady pace prevents me from feeling overwhelmed and ensures that nothing slips through the cracks.
You mentioned earlier that you see the front desk as a strategic hub. One term that often comes up in management is stakeholder management. Can you explain what that means to you and how it applies to coordinating large administrative projects?
To me, stakeholder management is the process of identifying and engaging with everyone who has a vested interest in a project. In an administrative context, a stakeholder isn't just the boss. It's the department heads, the external vendors, the IT team, and even the employees who will be affected by a change in office policy. When I'm coordinating a large project, like implementing a new visitor management system, I start by mapping out who the key players are. I identify what their specific needs and concerns are. For example, security cares about the logs, while the executives care about the speed of entry for their guests. By addressing these competing priorities early, I can align everyone's interests. It involves regular updates, active listening, and a lot of negotiation. The goal is to ensure that by the time the project is launched, everyone feels their voice was heard, which leads to much smoother adoption and fewer complaints after the fact.
That leads perfectly into a difficult scenario. What happens when those stakeholders clash? Imagine two senior managers both demand your immediate attention at the exact same time. They both think their task is the priority. How do you handle that?
The most important thing is to remain professional and avoid appearing dismissive to either party. I would start by acknowledging both requests immediately. I'd say something like, I see you both have urgent needs, and I want to make sure both are handled correctly. Then I'd ask a few clarifying questions to quickly assess the actual urgency and impact of each task. If one task is truly time-sensitive, for example, a document that needs to be in a meeting starting in 5 minutes, while the other is a report due by the end of the day, the priority becomes clear. I would explain this transparently to the second manager, saying, I'm just finishing a time-critical document for the board meeting, and then I will dive straight into your report immediately after. If both are equally urgent, I'll propose a compromise. I might handle the first one for 5 minutes and then move to the second, or I might involve another team member to assist one of them. The key is transparency. As long as the managers know they are on my radar and I have a plan to get their work done, they are usually very reasonable.
And what if the conflict isn't about your time, but about resources? Let's say two senior managers have differing opinions on how a shared resource, like a high-end conference room, should be allocated. They are both claiming it for the same time slot. How do you mediate that?
In that situation, I position myself as a neutral facilitator rather than a decision maker. First, I listen to both sides to understand the nature of their meetings. Is one a high-stakes client presentation and the other an internal team brainstorm? I would then gather objective data. I'll look at the usage patterns or the specific requirements for the room, like the need for specialized AV equipment. I'd bring this data to the discussion and facilitate a conversation focused on the company's overall objectives. I might suggest, since the internal meeting doesn't require the projection system, would you be open to using the smaller breakout room, and I'll make sure it's fully prepared for you. If we can't find a compromise and the deadlock persists, I would propose a temporary solution to keep things moving, and if absolutely necessary, I would escalate the issue to their shared superior or the office manager. But my goal is always to resolve it at my level through diplomacy and data.
I appreciate that you don't just say, I'll tell my boss. You try to solve it first. Now, looking at your skill set, you have 4 years under your belt. What advanced skills do you bring to the table that go beyond basic administrative tasks? What can you do to actually improve our processes?
I've spent a lot of time developing skills in data analysis and workflow automation. Don't just follow a process, I analyze it. For instance, I can look at performance metrics, like average guest check-in time or the frequency of certain requests, to identify where we are losing efficiency. I'm very comfortable with process mapping, where I visually lay out a workflow to see where the bottlenecks are. I've used tools like macros or basic workflow software to automate repetitive tasks, which frees up time for more high-value work. I also have experience integrating digital tools, like CRMS or project management software, to ensure that information isn't trapped in email threads but is accessible to the whole team. Beyond the technical side, I'm experienced in training other staff on these new procedures. I believe a process improvement is only successful if the team actually adopts it, so I focus heavily on the documentation and training phase.
Let's switch gears to the human element. Front desk staff often see people at their worst or most stressed. If a visitor arrives and they are visibly distressed, maybe they're upset, crying, or just very agitated, what steps do you take to handle that?
The first priority is to de-escalate the emotion and make the person feel safe and seen. Approach them calmly with a warm, professional demeanor. Use a soft, reassuring tone. I'll acknowledge their distress immediately by saying something like, "I can see this is a very difficult moment for you. Please know that I'm here to help." If possible, I'll offer them a seat in a quiet area away from the main lobby. Giving them physical space and a bit of privacy allows them to compose themselves. I listen actively and show empathy without making assumptions about why they are upset. If they need a glass of water or a moment of silence, I provide that promptly. If the issue is something I can solve, I'll do it right then and there. If it's outside my scope, I will involve the appropriate person or team, but I'll keep the visitor informed throughout the process. Don't want them to feel like they've been handed off or forgotten. The goal is to make them feel respected and supported from the second they walk through the door.
That's very empathetic. Now let's talk about a more technical failure. Technology is great until it isn't. Can you describe a time when the technology failed, maybe the phone lines went down or the internet crashed, and how you adapted your workflow?
Technology failures are inevitable, so I believe the only way to handle them is to have a mental backup plan ready. I remember a situation in a previous role where our main phone system crashed during a peak period. The first thing I did was assess the impact. I realized that we were losing both incoming client calls and our internal communication. Immediately activated our backup plan. We switched to forwarding critical lines to mobile phones and used a secondary VoIP line for the most urgent needs. I notified the IT team and the service provider immediately, but while they were troubleshooting, I didn't let the office stop running. I implemented manual paper logs to track every single call and visitor so that no one was forgotten. I used email and instant messaging as our primary communication channels for the staff to keep everyone aligned. Once the system was back up, I didn't just go back to normal. I documented the outage, how we responded, and identified where the gaps were in our backup plan. This allowed us to create a more robust disaster recovery protocol for the front desk, so the next time it happened, we were even faster.
Speaking of that, if the main phone system went down right now, what are the specific manual protocols you would implement immediately?
Immediately, my first move is to ensure the outside world knows we are still reachable. I would switch to a predefined backup method, like forwarding the main line to a designated mobile device or a secondary line if available. Then I would send out a quick alert to the internal staff via email or a messaging app to let them know the phones are down so they don't panic when they can't reach the front. I would then start a manual call log. I'd record the time, the caller's name, their number, and the urgency of the call. This ensures a clean audit trail for when the system returns. I'd also update the voicemail greeting if I have remote access, informing callers of the technical issue and providing an alternative contact email or number. The goal is to maintain a professional image and ensure that no client feels ignored just because our hardware failed.
Let's move to organization. A lot of people can file a folder, but managing a system for long-term accessibility and compliance is different. What are the best practices for organizing both physical and digital filing systems?
The foundation of any good filing system is consistency and a clear structure. For physical files, I use a standardized naming convention and a strict labeling system. I don't just put files in cabinets. I maintain a master index or a log that tells me exactly where a document is located. This eliminates the time wasted hunting through drawers. For digital files, I believe in a logical folder hierarchy. Avoid generic names like Document 8 or Final Version. Instead, I use descriptive file names that include the date, project name, and version number. Regular backups are non-negotiable to prevent data loss. Most importantly, both systems must comply with legal and industry regulations. This means implementing strict retention policies, knowing when a document must be archived or destroyed. Access should be restricted to authorized personnel, only to maintain security. I also believe in conducting regular audits. Every 6 months, I'll go through the system to purge outdated files and ensure that the organization is still serving the team's needs.
You're in a high-traffic area. You're bound to overhear things. If you overhear a private or sensitive conversation between executives, how do you handle that? How do you stay attentive to your job without violating their privacy?
The rule is simple: professional invisibility. If I overhear a private conversation, I immediately focus my attention on my current task. Avoid any facial expressions or reactions that might indicate I've heard something. I respect the privacy of the conversation by not acknowledging or repeating what was said. Unless the conversation involves a direct safety threat or a legal violation that requires reporting, it doesn't exist to me. My goal is to remain an attentive presence in the environment, knowing when a guest arrives or when a phone rings, but to be a vacuum when it comes to sensitive internal information. Discretion is one of the most valuable assets a front desk professional can have.
I agree. Now let's talk about security. What if you suspect a minor security breach or a policy violation in the office? Maybe you saw someone enter a restricted area or a guest who wasn't properly signed in. What is your protocol for investigation and reporting?
My first step is to gather facts discreetly. I want to avoid causing unnecessary alarm or making accusations without evidence. I would start by reviewing any available logs, such as the visitor sign-in sheet, access badge records, or surveillance footage if I have access to it. I want to confirm whether a violation actually occurred. Once I have the facts, I document everything in detail. I'll record the time, the location, the individuals involved, and the potential impact of the breach. Then I would report this information to the appropriate supervisor or the security team, following the established company protocol. I make it a point not to confront the suspected individual directly unless I'm specifically instructed to do so by security or management. Confronting them could compromise an investigation or create a hostile situation. The goal is to handle the situation professionally and confidentially, ensuring the breach is closed and corrective actions are taken to prevent it from happening again.
Let's wrap up with a question about interpersonal influence. Can you describe a time you had to persuade a difficult person to follow a specific office procedure? Maybe someone who thought the rules didn't apply to them.
I had a situation at my previous firm where a senior consultant refused to use the new digital guest check-in system. He felt it was a waste of time and continued to bring guests in without notifying the desk, which created security risk and scheduling conflicts. Instead of just telling him he was breaking the rules, I took a moment to listen to his frustrations. He felt the system was clunky. I acknowledged his time was valuable, which showed him respect. Then I explained the benefits of the procedure in terms he cared about. I pointed out that using the system actually sent him an automated alert the second his guest arrived, meaning he didn't have to keep checking the lobby or wait for me to call him. I showed him a shortcut to make the process faster and offered to walk him through it one more time. By shifting the focus from a rule he had to follow to a benefit he could receive, he became much more cooperative. The key was staying calm, remaining professional, and making him feel heard while still holding the line on the procedure.
This has been a very thorough conversation. You've demonstrated not only the technical skills we need, but the emotional intelligence and leadership required for this role. Before we close, do you have any final thoughts or questions for me?
I just want to reiterate that I view the front desk as more than just an entry point. It's an opportunity to improve the efficiency of the entire office. I'm looking forward to the possibility of bringing my experience in process optimization and stakeholder management to your team. I don't have any other questions at the moment, as you've provided a very clear picture of what you're looking for. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you as well. We will be in touch regarding the next steps very soon. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.